Hello, Professor. My name is Siobhan Johnson, and this is my Minesweeper project for CMP 168. Now, at the top of my project, I import a bunch of things for use in the project. I import the J buttons, the J frames, the J option panes, J panels, grid layout, action listener, a random event that I'll use later, the action event, and a color event. Down here, we have the method. We have we have all the methods for the constructors. We have the bomb grid, count grid, num rows, num columns, and the num bombs. And right above them, we have some of my own methods that I use for the actual game. Down here we have the default constructor for the grid, where it sets all the default values. Then we have this constructor for the grid where you can enter in your number of rows, your number of columns, but the number of bombs is still the same as the default constructor. And then we have another constructor where you can enter in the number of rows, columns, and the number of bombs. And as you can see here, it will take those in. Then we have the getter. Then we have the getter methods for the constructor, the number of rows, the number of columns, the number of bombs. Alright. Here we have some for loops to generate, and here we have some for loops to create the to get copies of the bomb grid and the count grid. And here we have a simple if-else statement that checks if there's a bomb on the location. Okay, for the get counter location, it's kind of long. But what it does is the if statements are there to check the position. So it checks the column and it checks the column and it checks the row to see if there's any space. See if there's any space after the position or any space for the position. And depending on where it is, like the for statements are slightly modified. So if there's no space after, position, it'll only check that position and then the position in front of it. For the rows, and it's the same thing for the columns. Anyways, that's mainly what get count location is. And of course, like if there's a bomb location, it adds a count. It adds a count and then returns a count. Now for the bomb grid, I first have it go through and set the entire grid to false, and then I have another for loop that go, and then I have another for loop that goes through until all the bombs have been placed and chooses random locations for the bomb. And if there already is a bomb there, it chooses another location, and if there isn't, then it just then it places a new bomb there. For the count grid, it just goes through and gets the number of bombs at the location. Now for the show grid method, like I mentioned my own methods. I have the J button player grid, which I initialize here for the number of rows and the number of columns. Then I set the size of the window for 500 and 500. I set the tile. I set resizable to be true. I set the default close operation to be exit on close. And I set the location relative to null. And I also made the main panel, and I made the grid layout for the main panel. Now here I have some more for loops where I create J buttons for each position of the player grid, and I also add that new J button to the main panel. And down here is where I create and down here is a similar thing, but instead of creating new J buttons, I create new action listener events. So we have so you have a check, so it checks to see if there's a bomb at the location, and then also, and if there is, then it creates a new bomb event and then adds that event to that part of the grid. Now here we have, here we have the safe event, which is if there's no bomb at the location, and then it does the same thing as a safe event. Now this is a zero event, which is in the case that there's a zero layer. I wasn't able to get it working, but I'll show off what I could get working later. And then I add the main panel and have it be visible. Now I created classes because I had trouble getting the different event. Because I had trouble getting the different events to work without having them just be certain classes. So I created classes for them. This one is a safe event, and then as the action performed. And for this, it first creates a new string, which will be used to display the number of bombs at around that cell. Alright, it gets the source, and then I have a for loop that goes through and checks if that position is the source. Checks if that position is the source, is what was clicked, and if it is, I assign the string with with the number of bombs at the location. Then I set the text. I also increment a tile. I also increment this variable here, which is used later. And then I also have another that I call another message, which is where this variable is used. Now the bomb event really only does one thing. Alright, it sets your win value, which is used to check if you win, to false, and then immediately ends the game. Now the zero event is one that I couldn't get working, like I said before. Okay, it was initially supposed, I planned to get it to go until it finds a bomb, but I wasn't able to properly. And it will go through, get the counter location, and set the proper background, and increment this variable, and check to see if it won. But I wasn't able to get it working. I'll show off why it doesn't later. But yeah, it will go through, it will set the background, and I have some color values I set it to, which are similar to what I use to when I end the game. Now I created another method that checks if you've won, and it's a equation that checks to see how that uses this variable and subtracts it from num rows minus num columns to check if all the remaining cells are the ones containing the bombs. And if that value is true, that means that there are not all the cells remaining are bombs, and that you've won the game, and then it should end the game. And for an endgame function, I have another for loops that goes through, checks if there's a bomb at location. If that's true, it sets the text to B for bomb. It sets the background to black, it sets the foreground to red. And if it's not a bomb, then it just goes through and gets the number of bombs at location. And then does the same thing, sets the background color to white, sets the text, and sets the foreground color to blue. Now this Boolean variable is that Boolean variable was here to tell the program if you've won or not. If you've won, it shows a message saying that you win. If you didn't, it shows a message that you lose. And after that, it asks you if you want to go. It says game over and asks you if you want to go again, and gives you the option. If you choose the no option, it completely gets rid of the window and closes. If you choose the yes option, it gets rid of the previous window and it restarts the game, which is right here, which creates a new grid with a default constructor, and then calls the show grid method. Alright, so now I'm just going to demonstrate how it works. I'll use the Alright, I'll use the default constructor. And as you can see, it opens up. You click on space, it shows the number of bombs around here. 4 bombs there, 1 bomb there, 1, no bombs, 2 bombs, 4, and we got the bombs. And as you can see, it counts the number of bombs there, and it says use. And actually, if you want to go again, you hit yes, you can go again. And from there, you can just close. If you don't want to go again, you can just close. Now we still have now we also have the different constructors. So if I try, I'll also come with different parameters. So if I try F, which is which has 3 rows, 3 columns, and only 1 bomb, I can go through the different bombs. Alright, see the bomb is most likely right here. Click on that, and then we can see the win message. You win. You can go again, click yes, it starts off with a new default constructor. Alright. Now for the zero event. I wasn't able to get that working. I wasn't able to get that working. What it would do was that okay, it was supposed to go through like all the bombs around it and then try. Alright. No, it's supposed to go through all the spaces around it and then show so go through all the spaces around it and show how show how many bombs are around that location. Yeah, and show how many bombs are around that location. But I wasn't able to get it properly working, and as you'll see, it doesn't. As you'll see, it does kind of work that way, but it doesn't really do it properly. So I'm making a new 10 by 10 grid. So I'm making a 10 by 10 grid with only 1 bomb, so it can accurately show how it doesn't work. So if I click here, you see it go. Actually, I accidentally made it just go through from the first position and then just go down to where it encounters a bomb and then just stop. Another thing is because of how it works, the zeros don't work. Okay, a lot of certain cells that didn't get revealed just don't work. And as you saw, just randomly clicking on a cell just shows just randomly clicking on any cell just shows just shows everything. Just goes through and shows how they're available. And also gives out a bunch of errors. But yeah, that part of my code. I wasn't able to get the zero events working. But I was able to get the 0 event working. But everything else works just fine. The default constructor, all the other constructors. Alright, finding the number of bombs on location, creating the actual window for the game, the action listeners, all the stuff, it works. So yeah, I'd say this was kinda challenging, but I found this somewhat challenging, but looking at the examples that you gave really helped me figure out how to do this. So yeah, that's my project. Thanks for watching.